In the past few months, the Housing Authority has faced some controversy over some vendors being paid late due to problems with the check signatories. HCTV spoke with both the Housing Authority Chairwoman and Executive Director to try and get some clarification on the subject.
What happened with that is that the board should have been presented with a very routine, very boring resolution just to change the bank signatories in May when we reorganize, because that's something that needs to be done every year when we reorganize. However, no resolution was included in the board's packet, and so we didn't vote on any resolution. Somebody at the Housing Authority figured out that there was a mistake made in not including that in May. So instead of alerting the board to the fact that there was this issue and that checks were going to be late, nobody told the board, and instead they just put a resolution on the June agenda. The problem is, by the time the board met in June, the housing voucher checks were already almost 2 weeks late, and nobody told the board. So to make matters even worse, the resolution that we did have in front of us in June contained the word facsimile about a dozen times, and it would have given the executive director the authority to use my and Vice Chair Mello's signatures, copies of our signatures, on checks without any limit on the amount. We asked the attorney if we could modify the resolution and amend the resolution to remove the troubling language, and the attorney's position was that it was so riddled with the word facsimile that it was impossible to amend and we needed a new resolution. At that point, the CFO told us that this was the exact resolution from the bank, verbatim what they had received. Unfortunately, the executive director left a few minutes before we were to consider this resolution, so we weren't able to ask him any questions about it. And in that resolution, the executive director certified to the bank that the resolution had been adopted by the board. The resolution itself says that it's the desire of the board to adopt this resolution. The problem is that the resolution was never even presented to the board. The only resolution that was presented to the board in July of 2013 was designated P&C as the depository. There were no resolutions concerning signatures. So the certification to the bank that the board had adopted this resolution was outright false as far as I can tell.
That was a simple misunderstanding that they complicated, which was caused by the chairwoman not adopting the resolution to be added on the bank accounts as a new signatory. It was that simple. And when the ramification ensued where the credit union didn't receive payment or vendors weren't getting paid, it was only because the bank wasn't going to recognize the chairwoman's signature because they failed to approve that resolution that changed now the signatories to the bank account. All of a sudden now, to say that we were going to be using, the chairwoman's signature in any way for facsimile purposes and not like that, no, we were not going to be stamping anything with the chairwoman's signature. No one in finance or my CFO was going to do that. The reality of it was that this is a corporate resolution that the bank had asked of us to put forth, and that comes from the CFO. That's not something that the executive director, is going to create a resolution. That comes from the CFO. And that's what we've always done. So when I was caught off guard with respect to why don't you want to approve the resolution or sign the checks, which they were held on to, and on top of that, it required them to proceed with making the change, which in previous years you had the vice chair who was the chairman, so there was no break in continuity. This time around you had that break because of the change in new officers. We have to add those new officers, and it's a standard operating procedure every year from the reorganization meeting. And you don't know who the chair is going to be, so you can't automatically put that resolution on during the May reorg meeting. So you have to wait a month. If certain times where there's no break in continuity, then you're fine. But in this case, unfortunately, you had that.